All right, today we're talking about something huge, an experiment that tried to do what sounds like science fiction, capture the spark of life itself in a bottle. So let's just jump right into the deep end with maybe the biggest question there is. Can life just arise from non-living stuff? I mean, for ages, that was a question for philosophers, right? For religion. But then in the 20th century, science basically said, hold my beaker, we're going to try and figure this out. And this really is it. Humanity's greatest question. Seriously, think about it. How do you get from, just rocks and water and gas to that very first living cell? It's a massive puzzle that pulls in chemistry, biology, you name it. Okay, so there's a fancy word for this, abiogenesis. All it really means is the idea that life could just start up naturally from non-living matter. The hypothesis is that if you get the conditions just right, the basic parts of life could form and assemble all on their own. No magic needed. A really bold idea, but here's the key part. It's something you can actually test. So to get what was going on in the 1950s, you have to understand this one big idea that was floating around. Scientists imagined the ancient Earth's oceans as this giant, warm, primordial soup, just full of simple chemicals, all sloshing around, basically waiting for a jolt of energy to cook them up into something, something more interesting. And this is where our story really kicks off, with a Nobel laureate named Miller-Urey. He had this theory that the early Earth's atmosphere was totally different from today's. He called it a reducing atmosphere. Think lots of methane, ammonia, hydrogen, but almost no oxygen. And then he asked this absolutely game-changing question. What if we could just recreate that ancient Earth in the lab? Could we see if that primordial soup actually cooks itself? Earth in a bottle. I mean, how cool is that? How do you even test a theory that's as big as a planet? Well, you shrink it. You build a little tiny Earth right there in a glass flask. And that's exactly what they decided to do. But it wasn't the famous Nobel laureate who did the hands-on work. No, the person who actually took on this crazy challenge was a young grad student named Stanley Miller. Talk about a high-pressure project, right? Urey was apparently a bit doubtful and basically told him, you've got 1 year to make this work. So, yeah, the clock was ticking. And the setup itself was just elegant. It was genius. So you start by boiling water. That's your ocean and your water vapor. Then that vapor mixes with the gases for your early atmosphere, the methane, ammonia, and hydrogen. Next up, you need a spark, so they zapped it with electricity to act like lightning. And finally, a cooling system acted like rain, condensing it all back down so they could collect whatever was created. It was literally the entire planet's water cycle humming away inside this glass contraption. So, Miller gets the whole thing running, and he didn't have to wait very long for something incredible to start happening. That crystal clear water, well, it started to change color. I mean, this was the first sign that something big was going on. After just 1 day, the water turned pink. A week later, it was a deep, cloudy red. You could see with your own eyes that this wasn't just a mix of water and gas anymore. Something totally new was being cooked up in there. So yeah, the color change was cool, but that's not the point, right? The real question, the million-dollar question, was what was that stuff? What was actually in that murky red liquid? What did the lightning create? The answer was a bombshell, amino acids. Now, if you don't know, amino acids are everything. They are the literal building blocks of proteins, and proteins are the little machines that do pretty much all the work inside our cells. Finding these in that flask, it was like showing up to an empty plot of land and finding neat stacks of bricks and lumber. It was proof that the raw materials for building life could be made from scratch. And let's be specific here. With the technology they had back in the 50s, Miller's team confirmed that they had created not 1, not 2, but 5 different kinds of amino acids. And finding these building blocks, man, this wasn't just another discovery. This was a complete game changer. This one experiment completely changed the way scientists even thought about where we came from. Let's just break down how huge this was. Okay, so first, it proved that the basic stuff of life could form all by itself, naturally. Bam. Second, it took this huge question about the origin of life out of philosophy books and put it right into the science lab. It also kicked off a whole new field of science called prebiotic chemistry. And this is a big one. It became one of the cornerstones of astrobiology, the search for life on other planets. And for about 50 years, that was the story. A legendary experiment, a huge success. But, and you knew there was a but, right? The story doesn't end there. It turns out Miller's experiment was way way more successful than he ever realized. So, get this. Years later, after Miller had passed away, some of his old students found the original samples, the little vials from the 1950s, just sitting in a box. In 2008, they decided to reanalyze them, but this time with super sensitive modern tech. And what did they find? Where Miller found 5 amino acids, they found over 22. 22, plus a bunch of other useful organic molecules. It's just incredible. The experiment worked even better than he ever knew. And here's another cool twist. They also found vials from a different version of the experiment that Miller never even published. This one was designed to mimic a volcanic eruption, with a jet of steam hitting the sparks. And guess what? That volcanic soup was even richer with complex molecules. What that tells us is that maybe it wasn't just one place. Maybe lightning storms, volcanic vents, maybe lots of places on the early Earth were cranking out the building blocks of life. So all of this really makes you step back and think. If the fundamental parts of life are actually this easy to create, what does that say about our place in the cosmos? And that's really the core legacy here. This experiment suggests that the stuff we're made of isn't some rare cosmic fluke. It might just be normal, a totally natural result of chemistry doing its thing here on Earth and maybe everywhere else. And this isn't just something that happens in a lab. We have proof. Back in 1969, a meteorite crashed down in Australia. And when they studied it, they found many of the same amino acids that Miller cooked up in his flask. It's like a confirmation from space. This kind of chemistry is happening out there, on its own. Which leads us to the final, mind-bending thought. The Miller-Urey experiment showed us how a simple spark can create the very stuff of life from a chemical soup. So, if that same kind of spark has flickered on billions, maybe trillions of other planets across the universe, what does that mean for us, for how special we are? It's a question that began in a little glass bottle in a lab, and now it's a question we're asking as we look up at the stars.